Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the West Ham Network. This is your keep or sell, but it's not my keep or sell. It's not your keep or sell. It's this man's keep or sell. Irish Tommy, how you doing, my man? You all right?
Yeah, good, my friend. Still floating a little bit from the conference final win.
Absolutely, mate.
Amazing moment, and something we'll never forget. So still floating. Obviously, our minds are kind of starting to turn now towards the transfer window and next season. And I suppose that's partly why we're getting into this video.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that about the floating high. I'm starting to see loads of clips coming out from Tottenham fans and going, "We're delusional fan base," and I'm like, "Yeah, okay, mate. Yeah, okay." That's only because I heard something about saying that they didn't even finish their qualifying games because of COVID. But they were happy to come out of the Conference League because they could focus on the league, and they got fourth in the Champions League. Yeah, but look how much that got you. Look how far that got you. Well done, Tottenham. Well done, Spurs. You've done a good job.
Yeah, we'll probably see Tottenham in the Europa League before too long next season.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, mate.
Third
Absolutely.
in their
Well,
group, dumped down to the Europa League, and they'll be swimming in the same waters as us.
absolutely. As we knock them out and head all the way over to Dublin.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
The whole country,
Wouldn't
could you
that be
imagine that?
unbelievable? If you could do it, that would be incredible. Tottenham
Yeah.
finished third in their group in the Champions League and
Yeah.
end up down in the Europa League with us, and then we draw them in like a
Semi-final.
quarter-final.
Could you imagine that? Holy shit. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be just the
And then
best
the
thing
final, the final's a hop, skip, and jump away from you, isn't it? As well.
Dublin, yeah, I'm there, man. I'm there. I don't have to
Yeah.
book accommodation or anything. I just drive up, drive to Dublin.
No, happy days. And like you said, Tommy, we're here to discuss the players keep and sell. So the idea and the concept is it's going to be quick, sharp. I'm not going to interfere much. It's all down to Tommy. I'm going to bring up every squad player that's currently in the squad of West Ham. He's going to say keep or sell and why. And it's short, sharp, straight to the point. So it is over to you, Tommy, and it is quite consuming now. We're at the kind of consuming. Oh, look at that tactical cup like that. But it's quite consuming now, isn't it? The transfer window. And of course, when you do YouTube and social media stuff, you're always going to have loads of, reports and links and rumors, etc. And what we try to do is bring you the links and the rumors and whether or not the player suits the system or not, or what we think, and it's our personal opinion. So yesterday, for example, we heard about Robin Koch coming out from Leeds being linked to West Ham. It's not a link that I'm enamored by. I don't know necessarily if I really believe it either, but we had a little look into his background and maybe why the link was there, because he is a bit of a dynamic player. He can play both as a central defensive midfielder and as a centre-back. So maybe there's a link there and maybe trying to put two and two together. But, it doesn't enlighten us with much joy. Anyway, Tommy, I'm going to start this show off by bringing you the first player. We're going to smash through them because there's a lot of players to get through. So first up, Lucas Fabianski. Keep or sell and why, Tommy?
We keep Lucas. He's still a very decent goalkeeper. I think the ideal situation really for us would be to bring Areola maybe in as our first choice keeper next season, have Fab as a backup. Maybe he can play some European stuff too. And then maybe move Fab on the following season. I think he's still a very good goalkeeper, Fab. I think it would be important to keep him and Areola around for next season. So I would keep Fab. He still has something to offer. We've seen that this season. He's been good. So keep. And we can't change the entire squad. There's only so much money we're going to have. And when you have certain positions that we need to prioritize, goalkeeper at the moment is not one of them. So keep Fabianski as a backup goalkeeper for next season.
Cool. If you are watching, give us your opinion as well. Next up is Areola. Tommy.
Keep. Obviously, very good goalkeeper. He's the heir apparent to Fabianski. Next season should be our first choice goalkeeper. It's his time now. So absolutely keep. Again, there's just no need to go looking for a goalkeeper when we've already got two very able goalkeepers at the club. So keep him 100%.
Perfect. So let's go for the third choice goalkeeper, Joseph Anang. Found himself on loan to Derby last year, back at the club, signed a bit of a longer term contract.
Yeah, I think we keep Joseph as well. Like I say, we're going to need, obviously, a third choice keeper as well. There's going to be occasions when Moyes, for reasons best known to himself, wants to have two keepers on the bench. and he's the obvious choice. So, I think we keep Anang as well, and let's see how he develops. He could end up, if he does very well next season and he impresses Moyes or whoever the manager happens to be come the end of the season, then he could find himself as a number 2 the following season. So he should, I think.
Let's get into the playing squad outfield and into the defenders first. Ben Johnson, keeper sell, and why?
I think, unfortunately for Ben, it's time to move on. I just don't see a future for him at the club. He hasn't developed in the way he might have. Not entirely his fault. I think, unfortunately for him, what he needed when he came into the team as a very promising young right back was to be given opportunities to play as a right back. But unfortunately, he's been moved from pillar to post under David Moyes. He's played in every position across the back line, including wing back, on both sides, left back, right back, centre back. And he's never really been able to develop into the right back that he might have been, because he's unfortunately become, under Moyes, a jack of all trades, master of none. And the progression for that reason, I think, just hasn't been there. He might have made it if he'd been put in at right back and given opportunities to win that position for himself and develop in that single specialised position. But that hasn't happened, and he just hasn't pushed on, unfortunately. And last season, I think, unfortunately, when we did see him, he just did not perform well whatsoever. I think he's quite disgruntled as well. I think this is a player who really needs a fresh start. He needs to go to a team that will play him every week, at right back preferably, and allow that development that he needs. Aaron, player that I love, excuse me, been at the club around 8 years or so, 8-9 years, something like that, maybe 10. I think he's due a testimonial. I don't think he's going to get one, but I think he's in that ballpark for a testimonial or thereabouts. Been a brilliant servant to the club. Showed last season he still has a little bit to offer. Again, ideally, I'd like to buy a left back in this transfer window. Someone who's younger, early mid-20s, who's relatively established already and will really improve us in that position. If we could do that, then I think somebody has to move on. And the question would be whether it would be Cress or whether it would be Emerson. But I'm kind of a bit soft-hearted on Cress. I'd love to see Cress retire as a Hammer, and he showed last season he still has a bit to offer. He's not a player who's washed up. I don't think he can play week in, week out and perform the way we would require him to. So I would keep Cress. I wouldn't get rid of him. I'd keep him for at least another season.
Captain?
And no, I think the captain is a player he's captain material, don't get me wrong. I think he's absolutely capable of being captain, and it wouldn't be undeserving if he got it. But for that to happen, he would have to be our starting left back week in, week out. We need our captain on the pitch every game. So I wouldn't give him the captaincy for that reason, because I don't think he'll be able to play every week. So I would keep him, but as a backup left back.
Yeah, excellent. Let's move into Vladimir Sifal.
Yeah, this is another kind of borderline one. He started off the season very poorly, just didn't look the same player in the first half of the season. He was really struggling for form, as were a lot of players, I suppose. The whole team really were, particularly in the first half of the season. There was a lot of rumours that he might be off, that we might sell him in January. Leverkusen were sniffing around him. So it looked like his time had come at West Ham, and that for some reason he wasn't the player he had been in the previous couple of seasons. But then in this second half of the season, he's kind of come back with a vengeance, and he's been the Vladimir Sofal that we remembered from the previous 2 seasons. So I think for that reason, he does look to me like we do still have the same Vladimir Sofal. I would keep him, but I would also bring in another right back who could really push him in that position and really fight for that shirt and potentially bench him. Those fullback positions are vital this summer. I think we need players in both, but I would keep him. Worst case scenario, the new right back might beat him out, and we still have Vladimir Sofal on the bench to call on. Very Mr. Reliable when you need him. So I would keep Vlad around.
Let's move into Tilo Kira.
Yeah, Tilo again. I think very good squad player. Didn't cost much money. He was cheap to buy. He's had a mixed season. He's had games where he's looked very good, and then he's had games where he's looked an absolute liability. But I think he's the kind of player who actually will probably improve in his second season with us. I think he did take a little while just to get used to the Premier League, but I think he did that. When he was called upon, generally, I think he did a solid job at centre back and right back. I like Tilo. I think there's a player in there, and he played for Germany the other night as well. So obviously, still rated by his international manager. So I don't think there's any particular reason to sell Kera. We'd probably only buy a like-for-like squad player if we did. So we may as well just keep him.
Cool, excellent. You mentioned him earlier on, Emerson Palmieri.
Yeah, in an ideal world, I like Emerson. I thought he had a really good final. I like him a lot, and I'd be kind of humming and hawing between: do you release him or do you release Aaron Cresswell? He's not a spring chicken either, Emerson. So the question would be, if we get in a new first choice left back, which one do you sacrifice? It's a tough one. This is something I could change. I could be persuaded the opposite way round on, but I think maybe move him on and keep Cress as the backup left back if we get in a first choice left back. As much as I like him, and I know this is one of the ones I'm going to get the most stick for. But like I said, I have to hold my hands up. I have a soft spot for Cress. I still think he's a good player, Cresswell, that can offer something next season. And I don't want to see him just booted out the door. I want to see Cress retire maybe after one more season at West Ham. So my heart is telling me to go with Cress over Emerson. So I'm going to say sell. Sorry,
Sell.
I'm going to
get. I'd love to get involved with it, but the whole point of this is just short, sharp, straight to the point.
Yeah, I'm going to get caned. Leave a comment, cane me like everybody else.
Leave a comment on Tommy, and he'll get back to you on
Emerson
that one.
To stay. Yeah.
Yep. Let's move into the centre backs, and that is Kurt Zouma.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a no-brainer. He stays with everybody fit. To me, he's still our best centre back. Fantastic player. Hopefully, that knee surgery that he's had, much needed surgery that he had, has sorted out that. Since he came back, then he hasn't had an injury, I don't think. So he's been able to play pretty solidly second half of the season, most of it. So one of our most important players, Kurt Zouma, 100%. I mean, I don't imagine any fan would be in the sell Zouma camp.
I find it really interesting very quickly that he is the most injury-prone player I know, but quickest recovered player I know. So we can get injured and recover really quickly from it. It's a really weird situation for us.
He can play injured for a lot of time. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe him and Dawson could play a whole season injured. Yeah, beside each other. It's crazy.
Augie, who's potentially been offered a new contract. What do we do?
I agree. Again, there is some sentimentality involved here in my answer. I won't deny that. Augie is a player I've loved for a long time. Again, a brilliant servant, and also not washed up. Augie, to me, is someone that if you call on Augie when you need him, he'll come in and he'll do a job for you. Lost a yard of pace, we know that, but his experience is invaluable. I think he's very important to have around the club too. Good character to have around. One of the leaders, I believe, off the pitch. And when you've got youngsters around as well, I mean, I think he's brilliant for them to have around with his experience. So I would keep Augie for one more season and then shake his hand as he retires a Hammer. He deserves that.
Yep. Naif Aguerd.
Again, he's a keep. For obvious reasons, it's a no-brainer. Spent a huge amount of money on him last summer, and we've yet to see the best of Aguerd. I think he had a little bit of a mixed season. There were times when he looked absolutely world-class and other times when he looked uncomfortable and all at sea a bit, which was surprising. But I think next season we'll see more consistency from him too. He's really bedded in now.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's an easy keep.
Cool. Next up is going into our midfield and the hero of the semi-final of the Europa Conference League, and that's Mr. Pablo Fornals.
Yeah, I'm mixed on this one, and I'll tell you why. I know. But again, this is sentimentality speaking, but I want to keep him at West Ham. I love Pablo Fornals. I think he's a cracking player who was underused last season. He loves the club. He's very passionate about West Ham, and he has a real rapport with the fan base. Quality player. Even if he is to be used mainly as a squad player next season, he's a great squad player to have. So I'd love to see him stay. I would not sell him. But there's that other side of me that loves him so much that feels like if he has another season at West Ham under David Moyes like he had last season, where he's just not in favour and he's frozen out for a lot of the season, I think it could cause him actual depression. We saw when he scored there against Bournemouth, he was in tears. I think it's been mentally very tough for him last season. So there's that part of me that really loves the guy, that feels like maybe he should move on. But I think that should be his decision ultimately, if he feels like he wants to. Me, I wouldn't sell him. I would keep Pablo, excellent player, love the guy, keep him at West Ham. But I'd understand if he came to me and said, look, I want to play regular football somewhere, I need to go somewhere, I would let him go out of love for the man, but keep him is my answer.
Let's move on to Lucas Paqueta.
Lucas Paqueta, what a player. He's going to be my new favourite player, I think, going forward. Just an incredible footballer. Again, took a while to get used to the pace and intensity of the Premier League, which is a lot higher than he would have had in Ligue 1 in France. It's a slower pace. He'd have more time on the ball, but he's really settled in now. We saw in the second half of the season, he just kept getting better and better and better. He's going to be unbelievable for us next season. He hit the ground running. Of course, it's a keep. It's, again, a no-brainer keep.
Absolutely, 100%. Next up is Flynn Downs.
Flynn, yes. Again, hasn't had as much game time as I think he probably should last season. I mean, for a lot of the season, Souček was absolutely horrible last season. Absolutely horrible. When Flynn really should have been given an opportunity to win that shirt and play in the midfield alongside Rice and Paqueta, he was not given that opportunity, no matter how bad Souček was, which I think is just a crazy situation, because when we've seen Flynn, we've seen that he does have talent. Very good passer of the ball, works very hard, good tackler, clean tackler, and you would think that's the kind of player that Moyes would quite admire, and that Moyes might have been more willing to actually give him an opportunity to take Souček's place when Souček was playing so terribly, but it didn't happen. So I feel bad for him, but there's definitely a player in there. Again, next season, most likely will be a squad player, but definitely a midfield squad player that's worth his place in the squad. Keep him 100%.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. Let's move on to Max Cornet.
Yeah, this has just been a bit of a nightmare signing, frankly. And it started off very promisingly. When he was introduced to games early in the season, he looked incredibly lively. He looked like he was carrying a real threat. He was causing real problems for defenders. The Chelsea away game, where that goal should never have been chalked off. His pace worried people. He had skill. It looks like he could finish. Excuse me. He looked very dangerous. I really liked what I saw from early on. And then obviously had that injury, which kept him out for far longer than expected. It was a far more troublesome injury than we thought it was going to be. Usually a calf strain is a pretty straightforward short-term injury. But since he's come back, he's been barely used by Moyes. He was getting 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, usually to replace Antonio up top. And frankly has not impressed since he came back in the team. He looks like a kind of almost like an imposter to the Cornet we saw early in the season. There is a player in there, and a player actually that I really like, because I was happy when we signed him. But it seems to me this is one. If there was a different manager, if we were replacing Moyes for a new manager, I might say, you know what, let's keep him. That might change his fortunes, because there's definitely a player in there. But I just think this is one that's not going to work out under David Moyes. So I think it's probably time to cut our losses on Max Cornet and move him on.
If you are watching, make sure you give us your comments and let us know what you think on Tommy, as has said today. Next up is Tommy Souček.
Oh, here we go. This is going to be another one that's going to split the fan base. To me, it's time to move Souček on. I just don't think it's going to work with him in a midfield three. For the most part this season, he's been just really, really, really bad. His passing is horrible. The amount of touches during a game are far too low for a player in his position. And, it just doesn't work for me. I mean, there's been too many games where the games have just passed him by. And we can't have that continuing to happen. I just think, I know he improved somewhat in the second half of the season, but particularly late on. But I just feel we need a different type of player in that midfield three, especially as we're losing Declan Rice now. So he's been brilliant, Thomas Souček, for the most part. And I really love him as a guy, great personality. And he does work hard. He's a trier. But I just think we've got to improve in that position next season. We have to. We just can't go through next season with Thomas Souček starting every game in the Premier League. I think it's just handicapping us a little too much. So move him on, sell him, in my opinion.
Perfect. So let's move on to Connor Coventry. Spent most of the season out on loan, but did get himself a winner's medal because he did play some of the early rounds of the Conference League. Connor Coventry, Tommy.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think another player that just hasn't worked out for West Ham, and the same old maybe as Josh Cullen. He's a good player, but I just don't think he's ever going to cut it at the level that we would need him to. For me, I think he's going to be kind of a good championship player, a very, very useful championship player. He does have ability, but just not the amount of ability that we need at the club for what we're looking to do next season, which would be, in David Moyes' mind, it would be to finish strongly in the league, well inside the top 10, and to challenge for the Europa League. I just don't think Cullen is the kind of player that's going to cut it at that level. So, unfortunately, I think his time is up at West Ham, so sell.
Sell Connor.
It's the best thing for Connor too. Connor needs to be playing week in, week out at a championship club and to become, the best player that he can. He needs to do that right now.
Yep, we're coming into the business end of the squad. Let's move into the most talked about player of the summer, and that is Declan Rice.
Well, there's two ways of answering this. I mean, look, we all want him to stay. And if it was simply my choice and I had the final say on whether Declan Rice is a West Ham player or not next season, then obviously he'd be staying. But again, we have to be pragmatic about it. If there was any way of keeping him, absolutely we keep him. But the reality is that we probably do have to sell him if the right bids come in. So pragmatically, yeah, it's a sell, but I'm going to say keep because that's what we all want. I think he's a world-class player, and if you want to keep world-class players, so Declan Rice, 100%, you absolutely want to keep him if there's any way to do that. So I know realistically that's not going to happen, but yeah, keep 100%. You try and keep Rice if you can.
Yep, 100%. Side Benrahma.
Yeah, this was a bizarre story to me that if it's true that Moyes is looking to move Benny on, I can't quite understand why. When we were horrible in the first kind of period of the season, those first kind of 10, 12 games before the World Cup, when we were absolutely awful. Yeah, Benny was probably the one player that was putting in performances and was looking lively and putting in a shift. And he was virtually the only player, almost. Maybe Thilo Kehrer, he had some good games early on, but he was the one player that was actually putting it in and putting in some performances and looking like good. And he's had a very strong finish to this. I think overall he's had a really good season. I mean, he can be frustrating. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes, the crossing can be erratic and his shooting is a bit erratic. It's not great. But in open play, I mean, he's been superb. He's been asked to take some very, very important spot kicks as well, including in the final. 6 of them, I believe, this season. He's buried every one of them. And teams have to account for him. I'm sure any team we play will have a discussion about Benrahma because they say, look, he's a danger. When he's on the ball, he's very tricky. He causes problems. He runs at fullbacks, turns them, gets beyond them, down to the byline, gets beyond them at the byline. Why you would want to sell him, I don't know. Now, we do need competition in that position. So I would like to see, as there's talk, obviously, Harvey Barnes. I'd love to get Harvey Barnes in, but that doesn't mean you have to sell Benny. Wouldn't you love to see Benny and Barnes fighting it out in training every week and in games to nail down that left wing position? We need to have competition.
Transition him into number 10.
Yeah, move him to the centre. He can absolutely play in a 10. If you wanted to have, say, whoever Rice's replacement is and Paqueta, like in a triangle with Benny in front of them, Benny could do a tremendous job there. I mean, that would actually be quite exciting, So 100% keep him. I don't understand why you would want to sell Benny. Fantastic player and was a vital player last season for us.
Yep, absolutely. Next up is Bowen is on fire, and he is, of course, doing his business with Danny Dyer.
Yeah, beg to brace with Danny. Yeah, of course, that's a no-brainer as well. You keep Jared Bowen. He does need competition as well. We need to sign someone who's kind of strong on that right wing, just to keep Jared on his toes. Maybe a young, promising, up-and-coming right winger, so Jared has one eye over his shoulder. He needs that competition, I think, to just keep him motivated and understand that if he drops below a certain level, that there's a player there who might take his spot. Again, had a mixed season, Jared. First half of the season, actually, I thought he was actually quite woeful, which really surprised me. I didn't think he would drop off that much. If he did lose a bit of form, I thought he would still be a decent, very useful player on the pitch, but he was awful the first half of the season. But obviously picked it up second half of the season and finished very strongly and scored a goal that will cement him forever in the history of this club. So, yeah, again, a no-brainer keep.
Yep, absolutely. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of our strikers, and I'll be intrigued to know if we have any strikers left by the end of this conversation. First up is Danny Ings.
Sell. Danny came in January for 15 million and on a lot of wages. A good striker, by the way. This is a guy who knows where the net is, and he's proven that season after season for a long time in the Premier League at various clubs. So, not his fault. He obviously is a good striker, but he needs to be in the right system, and West Ham isn't it. And the fact that David Moyes will be manager next season means that there just is no future for Danny Ings. I just don't see what he could realistically contribute in our system. Unfortunately, going to have to move Danny on. It's just not going to work at West Ham for him.
Next up is Mickey Antonio.
So, again, been a great servant for the club. He's our top scorer in the Premier League era. Again, but to be honest, there's an asterisk over that because our history with strikers in the Premier League is woeful. So, but yeah, great servant, great character. We all love Mick, great guy. But I think his time is up now at West Ham. He doesn't score enough goals. I know he does a lot of good stuff off the ball. Moyes probably sees him as vital to the way we play, and he probably is. He's the only person at the club currently who can actually play up front in Moyes' system. So, but we need to move him on now. I don't think it's going to get any better for Mick. I think he's at that age now as well where his performances are not going to hold up for a full season. It's time to move him on, in my opinion.
Finally, last but not least, Gianluca Scamacca.
Sell. As much as it pains me, I hate saying it. But again, I have to be pragmatic on this one. I think Scamacca is quality. I think we saw last season, particularly early on, he can score all kinds of goals. He can score with his head. He can score from close range. He can score from long range. He can hit volleys. He can hit low drives. Very, very good finisher. Very tidy in possession. He can pass. Good control with his feet. He has got a lot to recommend him, and I would love nothing more than to see Scamacca leading the line next season and scoring a bag full of goals, getting good service. But again, because Moyes is our manager next season, I just don't see how it can work in Moyes' system. I'd love to keep him because there's a real player in there, and I'm kind of pissed off at this whole Scamacca situation, if I'm completely honest. I think it's a bit disgraceful that we've shelled out 35 million quid, and then the following season we're having to fight off Roma who want to loan him. And we might be in a position where we have to do a loan to buy on a £35 million striker. It's a disgrace, especially as he's not a flop, in my opinion. I do not believe Scamacca has flopped at West Ham. I think David Moyes has flopped on this deal because he hasn't been able to get anything out of a really, really good player. It's David Moyes' one of his greatest faults, in my opinion, is the Haller situation all over again, except that this was Moyes' player.
Yeah,
this was the Moyes' player, and he was backed to the tune of 35 odd million quid on this deal, and it's shameful that we're having to send him back to Italy a year later. I'm pissed off about it, but pragmatically, unfortunately, because Moyes is our manager next season, we just need to sell him.
Well, let me bring you in the surprise package of the keep or sell, and it is the manager himself, David Moyes. Tommy, over to you, mate. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Christ, okay, this is going to be controversial again. David Moyes, I will forever be grateful to. Those 2 seasons where we finished 6th and 7th, I thoroughly enjoyed, even though it's not my style of football. It's no secret, I do not like the way our style of play under David Moyes, but the style of play the last 18 months has not been the same as it kind of was for the 18 months before that. I thought he got it right the first 18 months. Yes, we did get numbers behind the ball. Yes, we were hard to break down. We're tough. But we were superb on the counter-attack. When we won that ball back, we carried a real threat all the time. And from set pieces, we were a nightmare to deal with. Nobody liked playing against us. We were bullies. We were physical. We were bullies. We hit brilliantly on the counter. We were awful to deal with on set pieces. Can you really say much of anything of that anymore? Not really. The set pieces have kind of gone largely. We're struggling on the counter-attack. We're not really bullying teams physically anymore the way we were, certainly not to the same level at all. To me, it's just we've fallen off massively. He tried to change it last season with the style of play, tried to adapt into a more possession-based system. He couldn't do it. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, he's won as a cup, so he should be allowed to stay. And I understand the sentiment. It feels like that's the right thing to do. Just basic common decency suggests we shouldn't really sack him, should we, after winning a cup? And so I understand the sentiment, but I think it's short-sighted. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to suffer for that short-sighted next season, because I think it will come to him having to be sacked before Christmas. That's what I'm expecting, in my opinion. And I think that would be a shame for David Moyes, because he could have finished up in the perfect manner, winning us a cup, saying thank you very much, and then walking off into the sunset, a cup winner with West Ham, with all of us patting him on the back saying thank you very, very much, David Moyes. We will not forget that. But unfortunately, I think he'll go in a far more sour way, with fans at the stadium calling for his head, which is a shame, because it didn't have to be this way. I think it's short-sighted that we've kept him. Sell David Moyes, in my opinion.
Sell David Moyes. There is Irish Tommy's keep or sell for the West Ham current squad. Join us over the next coming days, because it's just going to be relentless. As you know, Tommy, it is relentless right now. Yeah. It's been relentless throughout the season. It never really ends as a West Ham fan. We've got players potentially heading out the door, players coming in the door. It's going to be swinging in roundabouts. Anyway, Tommy, thank you very much for joining us. If you are new around here, hit the subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment, all that jazz, and make sure you do go and check out Tommy's Late Show. He does most Fridays at 10 p.m. Take it easy, everyone, and of course, come on, you Irons.